fact, a PLT report was sent around about who are the key players and leaders within the protesters. Is that correct?
There were various reports.
Right.
Over the course of the...
And there was a list of whom PLT had identified as the leaders, and he was one of them. Was that right?
Yes.
And in fact, in that list, it said that Tom Marazzo had somewhat control over 322 trucks. Do you remember that?
The Freedom Convoy group is how I would remember that.
Would you agree it was about 322 trucks?
That was one of them that came up on a document, yes.
Right. All right. So on February 7th, you have your PLT team engaging with Tom Marazzo, is that right?
Correct.
Right. And you aware, and Tom Marazzo made this clear, that on February 7th you'd lost confidence in your liaison officers in trying to deal with this?
I was not aware of that.
All right. Did your police liaison officers ever report to you that on February 7th, Tom Marazzo specifically requested of both OPS and OPP that an inspector-level officer be made available for the negotiation to move the trucks because he wasn't getting anywhere with rank and file?
No. We had made arrangements for him to meet with a city official as he had requested. I don't know about the other comments that you've made.
All right. So the PLT officers that were working under you never reported that to you?
No.
All right. Now, I want to talk to you about February 8th. Now, there was discussions, that was when the first discussions with respect to removing the concrete barriers, et cetera, and moving the trucks took place. It was the first attempt to clear Rodeo and Sussex. Do you remember that?
At Rodeo and Sussex, yes.
Yeah. And all of the concrete barriers, both in the residential area as well as on Wellington, they were all still in place at that time?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I can't confirm that. We may have moved some. I wasn't keeping track of every Jersey barrier in the Corps.
Right. And Tom had essentially met, or Mr. Marazzo had met with these individuals from the city and from OPS to negotiate moving the trucks on to Wellington. But I understand it from your notes, et cetera, you knew at that time that wasn't going to happen.
So there was some confusion, I believe, about whether they were leaving or moving.
Right. And at no time did you have authorization from the city, not the OPS, on February 8th, 2022 to move the barriers, did you?
No. Well, we hadn't requested that yet.
Okay. So wouldn't it have made sense in trying to deal with this, to discuss with the city prior to meeting with Mr. Marazzo, that you're going to move these barriers to get these trucks out of the residential area and we're going to go into this negotiation with a plan? Wouldn't have that made more sense?
Well, once we had reached, if we had reached some sort of agreement, we had city crews available to us 24/7. That wasn't difficult to move a barrier.
Right. So, and you're aware that Wellington is well within the city of Ottawa's jurisdiction. It doesn't belong to Parliament.
Correct.
Right. So at any time on February 8th, 2022, there was nothing stopping OPS in the city from moving the barriers, letting the trucks leave the residential area, and letting them go on to Wellington, was there?
You're referring to Rideau and Sussex, which
Correct.
That's not necessarily a residential area. That's a commercial area there.
Right. So you agree that there was nothing stopping you or the city or OPS from allowing that to happen on February 8th, 2022?
It could have been done, but we didn't reach an agreement, and the group there didn't want to move.
I understand that may be the evidence. Where did you didn't ever hear from anyone from that group? You didn't speak to them, and they didn't say to you that they didn't want to move, did they?
I had dealings up at that street. I'd been up to Rideau and Sussex during the course of the events.
Right, and did they just go and tell you, someone approached you, you're saying, and said, no, we're not moving?
They made it clear on a number of occasions they weren't too happy.
But you knew from your PLT work that Tom Marazzo had apparent control of 322 trucks, and that was on February 7th. That's in your own document.
Correct.
And so if you move the barriers and the deal went through as discussed on February 8th, right, it could have been done.
I think there were some issues about whether they were leaving or moving, and I had spoke to Superintendent Patterson earlier, and we didn't have approval to do that.
Approval?
To move west.
Okay, and whose approval did you need?
The event commander, Superintendent Patterson.
Superintendent Patterson. So you're saying that Superintendent Patterson didn't permit the February 8th, 2022 deal?
So around 1738, I have notes about that when I talked to John Ferguson, that I had talked earlier to Mark Patterson, and we didn't, and the chief was involved, and we didn't have approval to move west at that point.
Okay, and you said you didn't have approval.
Yes.
Whose approval, again, was it Patterson?
The event commander.
The event commander. So you're saying that Patterson's approval was required in order to move the barriers?
Correct.
All right. Now, with respect to the February 14th agreement, if I can just have you direct your mind to that, that's the deal with the mayor on the Monday morning.
Yes.
So Mary Watson and the city manager, Steve Kay, they testified already in this proceeding that senior OPS officials were tasked to be on the ground to help facilitate the movements of trucks on February 14th. You heard that testimony, I take it?
I didn't hear that piece, no.
All right. Can you agree that you are the OPS official that the mayor and the city manager were referring to?
He's referring to me coming to the meeting on the 13th at City Hall. Yes, that would be me on the 13th. I wasn't on the ground on the 14th.
Right. And you weren't on the ground and you weren't attempting to carry out the move that was agreed to?
We were attempting. We moved 30 to 40 trucks up onto Wellington.
Right, and then it stopped?
It stopped for a number of reasons.
Right. Okay. At any time during the February 14th move, did Tom Marazzo or any of the leaders you had identified in your PLT report from February 7th say to you, we're going to renege? They didn't, did they?
No, they couldn't seem to finish the deal in the sense that there were groups that they couldn't get to move. There were groups that weren't on board.
So which groups?
There was a group on Bank Street.
Okay, but again, you were dealing with Tom Marazzo.
Correct.
Bank Street wasn't in those 322 trucks, was it?
See, that was something we didn't have. It wasn't clear who belonged to what groups, right? People
Right.
didn't wear team jerseys explaining who belonged to which team, so to speak, out there.
But they were trying to do it, and we've already seen evidence of this, and the barriers weren't being moved, so they could. So
we
when it
allowed
got cut
trucks.
off. Pardon me,
We
sir?
allowed trucks to move that agreed to move. We moved those trucks.
Okay, so you're saying that the trucks that agreed to move and go on to Wellington, you pulled up the barriers and allowed each and every one of them out of where they were and onto Wellington, and that you didn't stop anyone?
No, we didn't stop anyone on the Monday, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is the Government of Canada.